earthquake! It's an earthquake!
Let's get out of here.
Oh my gosh, guys.
This is life-altering.
We have to be pretty independent. We have to be pretty resilient.
We can get this recovery effort wrapped up.
The neighbors are kind of coming together.
People around the country and around the world look at us, they're going to say we want to do things the Anchorage way because Anchorage did this right.
On November 30th, 1 year ago, South Central experienced the largest earthquake to hit this area in 54 years.
Many buildings were damaged, some homes lost, and nerves rattled, but everyone lived with stories to tell and lessons to learn.
Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive deep into the science, explaining why the earth ruptured that day and why we didn't see a tsunami.
We'll also explore why some roads crumbled and others remained untouched, and most importantly, how we should prepare for the next one. Earthquakes are a part of life in Alaska. We've seen more than 40,000 of them this year alone. But the type of quake that forced the ground to shake last year was one of 3 types we can see at any time in the state. Beneath Alaska, huge tectonic plates are crashing into each other, a force strong enough to create volcanoes and some of the tallest mountains in the world. All of our 7.0 and larger earthquakes in Alaska can be traced back to the Pacific Plate being forced underneath the North American Plate. Geologist Rob Witter studies this subduction zone.
They're moving together at a rate of about 2.5 inches per year, and where they collide, friction causes them to stick together.
In 1964, we experienced what happens when there's friction between those two plates. It's called a megathrust earthquake, close to the Earth's surface, rupturing an area more than 500 miles long and 150 miles wide. That is not the only place these two plates cause tension. As the Pacific Plate moves north, Alaska is being compressed, causing numerous fault systems.
This part of Alaska is moving to the right compared to this part of Alaska.
This compression and shearing was the cause of the 2002 magnitude 7.9 Denali Fault earthquake. Another shallow and powerful quake that ruptured more than 200 miles of the Earth's surface. Unlike the shallow quakes of 64 or 2002, last year's quake happened deep inside the Earth.
The third type of fault we have is a fault in the subducting ocean plate here that dives below Alaska, and the place where it broke was 34 miles below Anchorage right there. Magnitude 7.1 caused by extension of the subducting ocean slab.
A simple model of 2 blocks illustrates how these faults are created.
It starts to bend and extend. If you pull these blocks apart, you can see that the block drops down. These, in this block model, are the faults that generated the 2018 earthquake.
An area roughly 15 miles by 20 miles ruptured within the plate, causing shaking at the surface of the Earth across South Central. Now, the rupture took about 30 seconds to break, but Jeremy, here on the Earth's surface, we learned shaking really varied depending on what type of ground you were on.
It absolutely did, Melissa. We can see that in the shake map put together by the USGS and the Alaska Earthquake Center. The areas shaded in the warmer colors shook more than the areas in these cooler colors. Now, when you look at the Anchorage Bowl and much of South Central, you can see the shaking was pretty uniform, but a few spots that shook harder were actually on a softer type of ground or softer soil. When you expand this map out, you can see as you get away from that epicenter, shaking did decrease pretty dramatically. And now, while the initial shaking was done in less than a minute, Aaron, we're constantly reminded of that rupture that happened 30 miles below our feet that day with all these aftershocks.
And Jeremy, that activity is still decreasing, but we're still feeling them even a year later. The Alaska Earthquake Center says we've already had more than 11,000 aftershocks, with the largest one being the 5.7 just 6 minutes after the main shock. Each aftershock continues to show us more about the faults under south central Alaska. So when do we stop calling them aftershocks? According to the Alaska Earthquake Center, it's when the seismic activity in the region returns back to the level it was at before the main shock, which is estimated to be at least another year and a half.
Now, Aaron, one of the bigger questions we've had is about our roads. How was DOT able to repair those so quickly, and are they ready for a big one?
Well, Melissa, our roads are critical, and not many realize just how critical they are, especially when several become impassable due to damage. Now, we spoke with the Department of Transportation to get answers to those questions.
The true power of the 7.1 could be seen in our roads.
I happened to be over in the maintenance station at the time of the earthquake, and so I got to see everyone, jump into action. So they got in their trucks and they start doing bridge and roadway inspections.
Inspections quickly turned to action as the extent of the damage was revealed. Roads built to last 20 years collapsed. According to Shannon McCarthy with the Alaska Department of Transportation, it was the result of geotechnical failures far below the roads, including soil liquefaction.
Out here in Minnesota International, that was actually a start of a rotational failure. It's when deep down the subgrade starts to, it shakes and then actually liquefies.
A similar failure caused Vine Road to crumble. The damage here was a result of failures caused by shaking and poor soil.
It's built over wet soils, and that's going to happen if you build a road over wet soils. Sometimes that cannot be avoided.
The rapid response to fix roads led to around-the-clock work. Crews had most roads repaired and ready to support traffic in a few days. But many of those fixes were only temporary.
We do expect a longer lifespan out of our roads. We expect a 20-year lifespan. And when you're doing construction, when it is 20 or 15 degrees, you just don't get the same quality.
So are our roads safe even with the temporary fixes? The short answer is yes. DOT warns any seismic event could damage roads because of what occurs beneath the surface of the earth, which can't be controlled. They say significant progress has been made, but more repairs are coming.
The big year will be 2020. And you'll see a lot of earthquake repair this next summer.
It's estimated that anywhere from $60 to $70 million will be used for permanent repairs on roads affected by last year's earthquake. And McCarthy says they're already thinking about the next one.
We don't want to assume that the next one is going to be like that. The next one could be from a different fault line, and we could have different types of damage. We could have more significant damage. In many ways, we got lucky.
Moving forward, the DOT will continue to improve critical infrastructure, which includes having a plan in place to keep Alaska moving when disaster strikes.
Now, of those repairs you'll see starting next year, most of them will be small, and communication for delays will be sent out beforehand. As for Vine Road, that project is more substantial and won't start until 2021.
Some impressive work last year, and amazing that they're still doing work even a year later and will be for years to come. Thank you, Aaron. Coming up, we know to expect earthquakes in Alaska, but what are the chances we see another large earthquake right below Anchorage? We'll tell you the size that would not surprise geologists.
And does Anchorage need to be prepared for a tsunami? We check in with the experts.
But first, so many memorable stories from that day. Our own John Thompson shared his story days after the earthquake when it was still considered a magnitude 7.0.
I feel like that morning, it was the tale of two mornings, right? Getting everybody into the weekend. We're ready for our weekends.
On to TGIF, good morning to you. I'm John Thompson.
And I'm Jeremy LaGoo. Not only
And then 8:29 hits. So many times when you're a reporter or an anchor, you're telling somebody's story, but you haven't lived the story. Here we are experiencing a 7.0 earthquake with the rest of Alaska. Whether people were watching or not, KTVA is Alaska, and we were right there. We were right there with them.
Now, the National Tsunami Warning Center warns us just because the 7.1 didn't trigger a wave doesn't mean we can let our guard down in the future. Drop, cover, and hold on was the first response from the team at the National Tsunami Warning Center.
We, shaking for about 50 seconds before we were able to respond.
Kara Gately is a senior watchstander at the center. As soon as the shaking stopped, Kara got to work, determining the tsunami risk for Alaska. She walked us through what the data showed in real time that day.
You can see here, 3 minutes in on this screen, we're up to a 7.2.
For the National Tsunami Warning Center, magnitude matters.
But 7.1 is our threshold for going out with a warning, and so we did go out with a warning for Cook Inlet.
Earthquakes of this magnitude have been known to cause landslides, ground failures, and liquefaction, all capable of creating a tsunami. Low tide, the location, depth, and magnitude all gave them hope that this was not a tsunami-generating earthquake, but they had to be sure.
And once we issue a tsunami warning, it is our procedure to ensure that there is absolutely no danger before canceling.
The Tsunami Warning Center closely monitored coastal tide gauges, checked with their partners, and even social media for any reports of abnormal waves, and only when they were certain there was no tsunami danger, they canceled the warning.
So we were in a warning for an hour and a half.
There was no tsunami danger for Anchorage that day. Could a different quake change that?
It's very hard to create a destructive tsunami that makes its way from the deep ocean in the Pacific all the way up Cook Inlet to impact Anchorage.
Hard to and not possible are very different things when it comes to a tsunami.
Safe side. When you consider Anchorage being both populated and a port, we want to err on the side of precaution.
Dr. James Gridley, director at the NTWC, explained why Anchorage is put under a warning and they treat the upper Cook Inlet as a coastal-facing waterway.
We have to. Until we have science to tell us otherwise, we can't take that risk.
The National Tsunami Warning Center, in partnership with the Alaska Earthquake Center, has proposed a geohazard study be done to determine the exact danger of a tsunami for Anchorage.
In the meantime, we'll continue to protect the upper Cook Inlet.
They want to make sure you understand tsunamis are a real danger for coastal Alaska, and knowing what to do in the event of a tsunami warning might save your life. Now, as soon as that new research on the tsunami danger for Anchorage is available, we'll be sure to let you know. Until then, it's best to head inland if you're near water and feel significant shaking. You can head over to KTVA.com for a link to a mobile tsunami mapping tool and evacuation routes for your area in case a tsunami warning is issued.
A great tool. Prepare now so you're ready for if you're in that scenario.
I mean, absolutely, especially being in Alaska.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. Well, Alaska is one of the most seismically active places in the world, which means feeling a shake here or there is part of life. But what are our chances of another big one? They're higher than you may think.
The Alaska Earthquake Center is constantly monitoring the state. That's more than 660,000 square miles that at any time could rupture.
And
Mike West, the director of the Alaska Earthquake Center, says events like the 7-1 are very common here. In fact, we've had about a dozen in the last 100 years.
intraslab earthquakes happen all the time along the Alaska Aleutian subduction zone, everywhere from south central all the way out to quite far out into the Aleutians.
But what are the chances we could see another large earthquake below Anchorage?
An earthquake like that, in theory, could happen tomorrow, right next door to where one happened last year. Or it could be, another 100 years.
It's impossible to know when the next quake is going to hit, but history has shown we should expect them.
A very large magnitude 8+ earthquake certainly would not surprise anyone.
And while talk of big earthquakes is common to researchers, the timing, location, and even the type of the next major earthquake to strike Alaska remains a mystery.
One of the things we do know about the next earthquake is it probably won't be the one that we're expecting. Time and time again, the next earthquake always takes a little bit different shape. There's always some surprise.
Bottom line, scientists say being prepared for earthquakes and tsunamis should be part of life in Alaska.
We do live in earthquake country, and we need to plan for earthquakes, not just individually, but also as communities, the same way that we do plan for many other kinds of catastrophes.
Now, last November was a reminder of the power earthquakes can generate. A reminder to not be afraid, but to be ready. And coming up, lessons learned, what scientists know today about earthquakes in Alaska that they didn't know a year ago. And did you feel it? Why the USGS really wants to know. But first, remember that video we captured of the shaking inside an Anchorage courtroom? One woman who was in the room at the time tells her story a year later.
Average day is come to work, sometimes go to court appearances, and hopefully not encounter any earthquakes. You know, I walked into court that morning and it was a typical Friday morning. I was there for a change of plea hearing and the room starts shaking. And so in my mind, I'm like, look, we live in Alaska. We have little earthquakes all the time. It's just gonna be a little one, it's gonna pass. The ceiling tiles start falling down. The walls are kind of cracking. It gets stronger and stronger. And at that point, I kind of go into panic mode and I just jump under the table. It was really scary. I still feel this to this day is how our community came together afterwards. People on social media were reaching out, people offering donations, food, you know, toys for kids, clothing for people who had, you know, significant property damage. It goes to show the strength of Anchorage.
For some, last year's earthquake is already a distant memory, and for others, they're still working through the repairs. But for dozens of scientists across the globe, the work is just getting started, learning new lessons from the 7.1. The data coming in from last November's earthquake is a scientist's dream.
It's rare that you get such a dense urban seismic network of strong motion instruments in a city like Anchorage that records a big magnitude 7 earthquake like that.
Especially for a quake that was roughly 30 miles below the Earth's surface.
Intraslab earthquakes are challenging because you can't go visit them. You can't take a field trip to go see where the earthquake actually happened because it was down inside the Earth.
But thanks to last year's quake, we now have new information that can help us better prepare for the future.
Scientifically, this is a rich source of data for the scientific community to improve building codes to help us understand the shaking that's caused by these types of earthquakes, and it can be applied globally.
Scientists discovered the hard way in 1964, one of our deadliest threats from earthquakes in Anchorage is landslides.
Anchorage, Turnagain by the sea.
Over the years, researchers like Dr. Randall Gibson
and the way the Earth moved
have worked to identify where and how the land is likely to fail in the future. But their models didn't quite match up to the real thing last year.
The models that we have based on worldwide earthquakes that look just at magnitude would have predicted somewhere between 3,000 and 8,000 landslides that could be mapped. But we would estimate the number of landslides in the hundreds rather than the thousands. So that's a very significant lower number.
Dr. Gibson has spent the last several months analyzing the new data from 2018, which shows researchers how not just the size, but the frequency of the waves moved the land differently last year compared to 64.
Last year, we had an earthquake with much higher frequency shaking like this and a much shorter duration.
This new information is just one example of how data from Anchorage can make not only us safer, but communities around the world.
If we're doing our work right, those are lessons that can be propagated. If we make changes in building codes or changes in how we monitor or how we build buildings, then those are lessons that hopefully are independent of the actual whatever the next earthquake is.
We know another earthquake is coming. Now the scientific community has more details about what we should expect. And if you'd like to learn more about Dr. Gibson's research or other research projects using data from 2018, we've provided a link at KTVA.com. Coming up, what you can do to prepare now, the recommended items for your earthquake kit, and an easy checklist for what to do during and after an earthquake.
As we've learned tonight, at some point there will be another large earthquake in Alaska. And now is the time to prepare. The first thing you can do is practice drop, cover, and hold on drills. Develop a plan for home and at work. For many, their first reaction is to run, but this actually increases the chances you'll be hit by falling objects. Also, standing in a doorway is not recommended. You can still be hit by flying objects there and potentially even get trapped. Next, put together an earthquake kit. Some of the most important items to include a pipe wrench, flashlights, a first aid kit, and enough supplies to meet your needs for at least 7 days, including at least 3 gallons of water per person. You also want to include medications and needs for infants and pets, and it's a good idea to have an extra set of warm clothes for each person.
You can also prepare now to know what to do in an earthquake as soon as the shaking stops. Know that there will likely be aftershocks. First, check for injuries on yourself and those around you. Check for structural damage and evacuate if necessary. If you are along a coastline, evacuate inland or to higher ground to avoid a tsunami threat. If you smell gas or see a break in the line, shut off the master feed to your house, but only do this if there is a leak. And finally, stay tuned to TV or radio for the latest information.
And did you know USGS really wants to know if you felt it? You can report your experience through the USGS website. Scientists use this information to create maps showing the extent of damages and shaking intensity. This data also helps scientists better understand the ground motion behavior, which they can use for new earthquake research.
We've placed all of those checklists on KTVA.com along with additional details about how to stay safe in a variety of earthquake scenarios and how to form that emergency plan. We've all learned lessons over the last year, and going forward, on behalf of Jeremy, Aaron, and myself, we hope you feel empowered and prepared for the next one. Good night.